In the viewing theater of the Eye of Eternity, the Grand Archivist Talon adjusted his secondary optic lenses, staring at the perfect, terrifying void on the main display. It was a hole cut into the fabric of the cosmos, a silhouette of absolute negation against the vibrant, swirling tapestry of the Sagittarius arm. "It is a Class Omega dead world," Talon murmured, his chitinous mandibles clicking in a rhythm of deep-seated unease. "No geothermal signature. No atmospheric friction. It does not even possess an albedo. It simply eats light." Beside him, Commander Marcus Vance of the United Earth Expeditionary Force leaned against the chrome railing, a half-eaten protein bar dangling from his fingers. He didn't look terrified. He looked like a man staring at a stubborn rusty bolt he was trying to figure out how to loosen. "A rogue planet," Vance said, taking a bite. "Frozen solid, drifted away from its parent star a few billion years ago. We find him all the time back home." "This is no mere rogue planet, Commander," Talon hissed softly, his bioluminescent crest shifting to a defensive shade of amber. "Our quantum resonance scanners cannot penetrate the crust. The gravitational metric is completely flat, yet its mass is undeniably there. It violates the third axiom of cosmic genesis: all matter must sing. This world is silent. It is a tomb. The Council has forbidden entry to this sector for 4 centuries. Yeah, well, the Council isn't running low on hyperdense deuterium for their fleet reactors," Vance replied, tossing the wrapper into a disposal chute. "We ran the math. A planet that dense, lacking a magnetic field or radiation output, means it's sitting on a core of collapsed metallic isotopes. To you, it's a cosmic horror. To the United Earth Logistics Corps, it's a gold mine." Talon turned his massive, multifaceted eyes toward the human. He had served alongside humans for 3 solar cycles, yet their fundamental lack of evolutionary reverence never ceased to shock him. The galaxy was full of ancient, terrifying mysteries, phenomena that any sensible, biologically adapted species gave a wide, respectful birth. When the insectoid Vren found a radiation anomaly, they fled, because their sensitive nervous systems would fry. When the crystalline lithids encountered a gravity well, they steered clear, knowing their rigid bodies would shatter. But humans? Humans lacked specialized sensory organs entirely. They were deaf to the cosmic radiation, blind to the subatomic shifts, and utterly numb to the spiritual weight of the void. And because they couldn't feel the universe warning them to stay away, they just walked right in. "We are sending a dropship," Vance stated flatly. "You will die in the dark, Commander," Talon warned, "and the void will not even echo your screams." The dropship Gerfalcon did not descend so much as it fell into the blind spot of the universe. Inside the cramped cockpit, Chief Pilot Elena Rostov kept her eyes locked on the synthetic aperture radar. Outside the reinforced viewport, there was nothing. Literally nothing. It wasn't the darkness of a night sky. It was the total erasure of vision. It felt less like flying through space and more like being buried alive in ink. "Altimeter is giving me garbage data," Elena said, her voice tight but steady over the internal comms. "The radar pulses are hitting the surface and just dying. No bounce back. I'm switching to inertial guidance and manual thruster gating." "Copy that, Elena." Vance's voice crackled from the rear compartment, where he and a team of 4 combat engineers were strapped into heavy exosuits. "Keep her nose up. We know the mass. We know the gravity is roughly 1.2 g. Just feel the descent." In the jump seat behind Elena, Talon clutched the safety harness with all 6 of his limbs. His antennae were flattened against his head, vibrating painfully. The silence of the planet was a physical pressure on his psychological core. To a species that perceived the universe through ambient electromagnetic harmony, this planet was a deafening, agonizing scream of nothingness. "The void," Talon whispered, his voice trembling. "It is drawing the energy from our systems. Look at the primary power cells." Elena glanced down. The digital readouts were fluctuating wildly. The power grid wasn't draining, but the voltage was becoming unstable, rippling like water in a glass during an earthquake. "Just some localized quantum interference," Elena muttered, her fingers dancing across a physical array of switches, bypassing the digital flight computer entirely. "The ship's got a titanium spine and analog backups." Chill. With a sudden, violent jolt, The Gerfalcon struck the surface. There was no sound of tearing metal, no crunch of rock, just a dead, heavy thud that rattled the teeth in their skulls. The landing struts groaned, compressed, and locked. They had arrived. The external floodlights of the Gerfalcon were massive, high-intensity halogen arrays designed to illuminate asteroid mines from kilometers away. When Elena flipped the breaker, they ignited with the power of a small sun. The light traveled exactly 3 meters before dying. It didn't fade or scatter. The beam hit an invisible barrier of absolute dark and stopped, creating a pathetic, glowing dome around the ship. Vance stepped out of the airlock first, his heavy magnetic boots sealing against the ground with a dull clunk. He raised a handheld lantern, throwing a frail circle of light over the terrain. "Well, Colin, you were right about one thing," Vance said through the radio. "It's definitely dark." The ground beneath their feet wasn't rock, soil, or ice. It was a perfectly smooth, dull black material that seemed to absorb the very concept of illumination. When Vance bent down and scraped at it with a diamond-tipped core drill, it didn't scratch. It left a faint, gray streak that vanished a second later, like a self-healing wound. The engineers immediately went to work, setting up a tripod-mounted seismic thumper. "We need to crack this shell to see what's underneath," Sergeant Miller, a burly engineer with a prosthetic arm, grunted as he calibrated the thumper. "If the core is what the long-range scans suggested, we're looking at enough fuel to power the entire sector's jump gates for a century." Colin stepped out of the airlock, moving with extreme caution. His biological sensors were overwhelmed. The absolute lack of ambient radiation felt like a vacuum trying to suck his consciousness out through his pores. He looked at the humans. They were laughing. One of them was adjusting a piece of duct tape on a sensor housing. "How are you doing this?" Colin asked, his voice broadcasting over the squad channel. "Do you not feel the wrongness of this place? The sheer, crushing malice of this void?" Vance turned his gold-tinted visor toward the alien. "Malice? Colin, it's a rock. A big, cold, weird rock. It doesn't hate us. It doesn't love us. It just doesn't care." "You do not understand," Colin insisted, his mandibles twitching frantically. "My people believe that places like this are the remnants of the pre-void, the chaos that existed before the stars were ignited. They are anomalies that devour consciousness. To stand here is to invite the dark into your mind." "With all due respect to your elders," Vance said, tapping the side of his helmet, "humans spent a few 100,000 years sitting around campfires staring into the dark, terrified of what was whispering in the bushes. We built a whole mythology around the monsters in the dark. But then we invented the flashlight, and we found out the whispering was just the wind." Before Colin could reply, the seismic thumper fired. Boom. The kinetic shockwave tore through the smooth crust, sending a deep, subterranean vibration through the soles of their boots. For a moment, the silence was broken. Then, the planet answered. The flat gravitational metric didn't just shift, it inverted. Suddenly, Colin felt his weight vanish. The ground beneath them began to ripple like a liquid silk sheet. "Heads up," Elena yelled over the comms from the cockpit. "Power grid just took a massive spike. Everything's going offline." The frail dome of halogen light flickered and died. The Gerfalcon went completely dark. The only illumination left came from the low-power emergency LEDs inside the humans' helmets, casting a faint, ghostly glow on their faces. From the dark, a sound began to rise. It wasn't a sound heard through the atmosphere. There was no air, but a vibration that bypassed their ears and resonated directly within their bones. It was a rhythmic, mechanical grinding, immense and ancient. "The core," Miller shouted, his voice cracking with sudden adrenaline. The thumper didn't crack rock. It triggered a circuit. The smooth ground beneath them split open. Perfect, geometric fissures unraveled across the landscape, glowing not with light, but with an even deeper, violet anti-light that seemed to bend the space around it. Colin fell to his knees, his nervous system completely seizing. The sheer volume of quantum data flooding his sensitive antennae was paralyzing. He could see the gravity lines twisting. He could feel the temporal field warping. The planet wasn't a dead world. It was a machine, an ancient, automated dreadnought or a planetary containment cell, waking up from a billion-year slumber because someone had knocked on its door with a sledgehammer. "We must flee," Colin screamed, unable to move his limbs. "It is eating our minds. It is the end." Through his blurring vision, Colin looked at Vance. The human commander wasn't paralyzed. His evolutionary biology hadn't given him the sensors to be overwhelmed by the quantum storm. He couldn't see the gravity lines twisting. He couldn't feel the temporal warp. To Vance, it was just a dark room where the floor had gotten slippery and the lights went out. "Miller, get the Thumper data logged," Vance roared, his voice cutting through the panic on the comms channel. "Elena, manual override on the emergency thrusters. I don't care if the computer is dead. Blow the cold gas lines and get us some lift." "I'm on it." Elena's voice was furious, fueled by pure, stubborn human survival instinct. Vance sprinted through the shifting, zero-gravity void, his magnetic boots clanging against the rippling metal crust of the planet. He reached Colin, scooping the massive, six-limbed alien off the ground with the assist of his exosuit's hydraulic musculature. "I've got you, buddy," Vance grunted, slinging Talon over his armored shoulder. "Hold onto your mandibles." The planet's automated defense mechanisms were deploying. Massive, monolithic structures of black alloy began to rise from the fissures, towering thousands of meters into the dark sky. They began to pulse with blinding arcs of localized EMP distortion. Any Council ship would have been instantly bricked, its biological crew driven into catatonic shock by the sensory overload. But the humans were already moving. Miller and the engineers scrambled up the Gerfalcon's boarding ramp, dragging their equipment behind them. Vance followed, his heavy boots denting the ramp as he forced his way inside against the erratic, shifting gravity wells. "We're clear. Close the hatch," Vance yelled, dumping Talon onto the deck of the cargo bay. Elena didn't wait for the airlock to fully seal. In the cockpit, she pulled a physical, red-painted lever, a mechanical cable linkage that opened the high-pressure emergency fuel valves directly into the auxiliary chemical thrusters. It was an archaic, crude backup system, completely devoid of computer assistance. The Gerfalcon didn't gracefully lift off. It exploded upward, propelled by a violent, dirty plume of burning hydrazine and liquid oxygen. The ship rattled violently, the structural frame screaming as it tore away from the anomalous planet's waking gravity traps. Through the viewport, the massive geometric monoliths reached for them like the fingers of a colossal shadow, but they were too slow. The human ship was crude, loud, and entirely driven by raw kinetic force. It didn't interact with the planet's elegant quantum fields, it just punched through them. Within minutes, the Gerfalcon broke the threshold of the planet's anomalous zone. The starfield returned in a sudden, brilliant flash of starlight. The digital displays flickered back to life, chiming with a chorus of normal, comforting system diagnostics. Back in the viewing theater of the Eye of Eternity, the medical droids were treating Talon for acute sensory exhaustion. His antennae were wrapped in damp cooling gel, and he was shaking weakly. Vance stood nearby, his helmet off, a wet towel draped around his neck. He was looking at a datapad that Miller had just handed him. "Unbelievable," Vance whispered, a massive grin spreading across his face. The Thumper's telemetry caught the whole thing before the blackout. "That's not a planet. It's a fully automated, hyper-compressed Dyson sphere core. The energy storage down there is off the charts." Colin looked up at him, his primary eyes wide with a mixture of awe and profound terror. You call it a fuel source," Colin breathed, his voice barely audible. "It almost destroyed us. It is an ancient, godlike intelligence that defies the laws of nature. It lives in the absolute dark." Vance walked over, placing a heavy, warm hand on the alien's chitinous shoulder. "Colin, the dark is just a place where we haven't brought a light yet," Vance said softly. "And as for defying the laws of nature, that just means we need to write some new laws." He turned back to the display, staring at the distant, spherical absence of stars. "Tell the Council to get their mining rigs ready," the human commander said, his eyes reflecting the distant starlight. "Humanity is going back in."